What
Or
Animal-like protists?
is an animal like protist? You're right, it is a protozoa. A protozoa are single-celled organisms from the kingdom Protista. The word protozoa is derived from two Greek words, namely proto meaning first and zoa meaning animals. The word protozoa was given by zoologist George August Goldfuss in 1820. They are the simplest and primitive of all animals. It can be found worldwide in every habitat. Around 50,000 species are known. Most of them are free-living organisms that can be symbiotic or parasitic. All organisms have protozoa living in or on their body at some time, and many persons are infected with one or more species throughout their life. Some species are considered commensals, normally not harmful, whereas others are pathogens and usually produce disease. Protozoa infections can be asymptomatic or life-threatening. It depends on the species and the strain of the parasite and the resistance of the host. Now, let's move on to their general characteristics as a protozoa. Number one, they are microscopic unicellular eukaryotes, which means that they have a single cell with no tissues or organs. Number two, they have one or more nuclei, which are monomorphic or dimorphic. Number three, they have different body sizes and shapes. It can be spherical, elongated, flat, or oval. Number four, their body is covered with pellicle, which means they have thin coating, or their body can be naked or covered with shells. Number five, it can be motile or non-motile, which means that they use either flagella, pseudopodia, or cilia for their locomotion. Number six, their locomotory organs are finger-like, hair-like, whip-like, or it can be none. Number seven, they have no germ layers. No germ layers. Number eight, they can be solitary or colonial, which means they can exist alone or with some other individuals that are alike and independent. Number nine, they ingest their food, which goes on a process called phagocytosis. Number 10, their digestion occurs inside the food vacuole intracellularly. Number 11, they are chemoheterotrophs, which means they get their energy by breaking down organic matter. Number 12, their nutrition can be holozoic or animal-like, holophytic or plant-like, saprozoic or parasitic. Number 13, they are capable of sexual reproduction, asexual or sexual. If they reproduce asexually, it can be a binary fission, schizogony, or budding. Or if they reproduce sexually, they will conjugate. And number 14, they have a complicated life cycle. It has an alternation of asexual and sexual phases. Now you know what is a protozoa and its general characteristics. Let's learn more about it by proceeding to the next subtopic.
hey there. Now let's talk about the anatomy and classifications of animal-like protists. We all know that protozoans are single-celled organisms. They come in many different shapes and sizes, ranging from an amoeba, which can change its shape to paramecium, with its fixed shape and complex structure. They live in a wide variety of moist habitats, including freshwater, marine environments, and the soil. The organelles of protozoans have functions similar to higher animals. It contains a plasma membrane, outer surface layer called pellicle, cytoplasm, and many more. The plasma membrane enclosing the cytoplasm covers the projecting locomotory structures such as the pseudopodia, cilia, and flagella. These locomotive parts are essential for the classification of different animal-like protists. The outer surface layer of some protozoa, termed a pellicle, is sufficiently rigid to maintain a distinctive shape. In most protozoa, the cytoplasm in this is differentiated into ectoplasm, the outer transparent layer, and endoplasm, the inner layer containing organelles. The structure of the cytoplasm is most easily seen in species with projecting pseudopodia, such as the amoebas. Some protozoa have a cytosome or cell mount for ingesting fluids or solid particles. Many protozoa have subpellicular microtubules. In the amoeba complexa, which have no external organelles for locomotion, these provide a means for slow movement. Many other structures occur in parasitic protozoa, including the Golgi apparatus, mitochondria, lysosomes, food vacuoles, and conoids. From the point of view of functional and physiological complexity, a protozoan is more like an animal than a single cell. Let's look at the different types of animal-like protists. We have four phylums. We have the phylum Mastigophora, phylum Sarcodina or Amoebozoa, phylum Apicomplexa or Sporozoa, and phylum Coleopora. Phylum Mastigophora or the flagellates are any group of unicellular type of protozoans and are about 2,000 species. They are mostly unnucleated organisms that possess at some time in the life cycle one to many flagella for locomotion and sensation. They are characterized by their long flagella which they use to move about. A flagellum is a hair-like structure capable of whip-like lashing movements that furnish locomotion. Traditionally, they are those protozoa which spend most of their time existence moving or feeding with a small number of flagella. This type of organization is the most widespread for protists. For real, many flagellates are not closely related to each other. The only common characteristic many share is the presence of flagella. Flagellates are commonly identified by whether they have chloroplasts or do not have chloroplasts. Flagellates with chloroplasts are commonly known as phytoflagellates, and flagellates without chloroplasts are called zooflagellates. Their habitat are marine and fresh water. A lot of organisms in phylum Mastigophora are parasites and they live inside the other organism. Some of these members of parasites cause diseases in humans and other animals. Modes of reproduction in Mastigophora vary depending on the organism. For instance, whereas most of the species largely rely on longitudinal binary fission, others have a more complex life cycle that switches between sexual and asexual modes of reproduction. In addition to binary fission, most of these can reproduce by the process known as zygamy, in which process Mastigophora reproduce sexually by combining the genetic material from two Mastigophora. Mastigophora are the heterotrophic protozoa of the Protista kingdom. Is phylum Sarcodina or Amoebozoa. Sarcodines are animal-like protists that have pseudopods. Pseudo means false, and pod means foot. Amoeba move by cytoplasmic streaming to produce pseudopods, process called amoeboid movement. Sarcodines also use their pseudopods for feeding by engulfing and surrounding food particles and other protists, called phagocytosis. Food is surrounded by a pseudopod, and then part of the cell membrane pinches together, forming a food vacuole, called endocytosis. Although some are parasitic on plants and animals, most sarcodines are free-living, feeding on bacteria, algae, other protozoans, or organic debris. The majority of species living in marine aquatic environments, but some occur in fresh water and are important members of the soil fauna. And some are parasitic in the intestinal tracts of vertebrates and invertebrates. Sarcodines reproduce sexually by syngamy, the fusion of two gametes, and asexually by division or budding. In multinucleate form, cytoplasmic division with division of the nuclei occurs. Next one is phylum Apicomplexa or Sporozoa. Phylum Apicomplexa is large and further divided into 300 genera and over 600 families that consist of over 5,000 species. Apicomplexans are named for the apical complex, a complex of microtubules in their apex. This cone-shaped organelle is used for invading host cells. Structures within the apical complex secretes enzymes and other proteins that circumvent a host cell's defenses and allow the parasite to enter. Apicomplexans form spores because this is an important part of their parasitic life cycle. Remember that a parasite is an organism that lives in, with, or on another organism and benefits itself while harming its host. The only known apicomplexan that isn't a parasite is Nymphomyces, a genus of mutualistic, beneficial symbionts that live in sea squirts. Apicomplexans have a complex life cycle, and there are large variations in their life cycle between different species. Generally speaking, the apicomplexan life cycle is said to start at the sporozoid, or infective stage. For the next stage, sporozoite will invade the host cell and then divide into many cells called mesozoites. For sexual reproduction, mesozoites then change into reproductive cells called gamonts. When two gamonts fuse, they form a gamontocyst, which then produce sex cells, gametes. Just like with most sexually reproducing organisms, two gametes fuse to form a zygote, which divides via meiosis and develops into a new generation of sporozoite. Apicomplexa and their related parasites can be found in marine and freshwater environments where they infect such hosts. They feed by absorbing either the soft food ingested by the host, saprozoite nutrition, or the host's cytoplasm and body fluids. Respiration and excretion occurs by simple diffusion through the cell membrane. Lastly, the phylum Ciliopora or ciliates. The ciliates phylum Ciliopora form a natural group distinguishable from other protozoa by a number of specialized features, including the possession of cilia, which are short, hair-like processes at some stage in their life cycle, the presence of two types of nuclei, and a unique form of sexual reproduction called conjugation. The ciliates are a group of protists commonly found in fresh water, such as lakes, ponds, rivers, and soil. The name ciliate comes from the many hair-like organelles called cilia that covers the cell membrane. Cilia are identical in structure to flagella, but are typically shorter and are found in much larger numbers than flagella are. All ciliates have cilia, which they use for swimming, crawling, feeding, and touching. They feed on bacteria, algae, and other small food particles. The macronucleus contains the genes that are used to regulate cell functions, and the micronuclei contains genes that are involved in sexual reproduction. The macronucleus has many copies of the genome and is generated from the micronucleus through replication of the genome. Periodically, the macronucleus must be generated from the micronuclei. Free-living ciliates can be found in almost any habitat that has water, in soils, hot springs, and even Antarctic sea ice. Ciliates generally reproduce by binary fission. During binary fission, the macronucleus enlarges and then splits, but it does not go through meiosis. Most ciliates are heterotrophic and feed on smaller organisms such as bacteria and algae. With a few exceptions, ciliates have a mouth. Food particles are swept into the funnel-shaped oral groove and towards the cell mouth by rows of cilia. The food particles are then engulfed by phagocytosis, forming a food vacuole. Lysosomes then fuse with the food vacuole. The digestive enzymes in the lysosomes break down the food. The food particles are then small enough to diffuse through the membrane of the food vacuole into the cytoplasm. Now you know the four different types of protozoans. Now let us dive into the examples of essential and known protozoans here in this planet.
Examples of protozoa. Trypanosoma. It is derived from the Greek trypano, which means borer, and soma, that means body. Trypanosomas are flagellated protozoa placed classically in the Zoomastigophora. Trichonympha. It is a multiflagellate symbiotic protozoan which inhabits the intestines of termites. Tetraemena. It is a ciliated protozoan. Toxoplasma. It is a widespread parasite that spreads through domestic cats. Leishmania. It includes several species of flagellated protozoa that cause different types of leishmaniasis in humans. Leishmaniasis is a disease that spreads by the bite of sandflies. What are the importance of protozoans? Protozoans play an important role to fertility soils, wastewater treatment processes, and protozoans are fundamental component in recycling essential nutrients, specifically the nitrogen and phosphorus to the phytoplankton. Even though there are many importance of protozoans, there are still bad or harmful effects like diseases that are caused by protozoans. So, what are those diseases? Here are some diseases that are caused by protozoans. Malaria. Malaria is being carried by the female Anopheles mosquito and usually bites during dusk and dawn. It needs an incubation for 7 days. So if it is developed before 7 days after the exposure, it might not be a malaria. Amoebiasis. It is a type of gastrointestinal infection that are often linked to poor sanitation and socioeconomic status. Babesiosis. It is a disease caused by microscopic red blood cell infecting the parasite called Babesia microti. There are other harmful effects that are caused by protozoa, like pollution of water and destruction of animals of food value.